this edition of the Boob Buddies podcast, featuring our discussion of the Cinemax original series Outcast, episode 102, entitled I Remember When She Loved Me. I'm Adam Foxman, this is Mathis.
Hello.
And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. We'd love to field any questions, comments, and concerns, and also please rate us on iTunes. This is the number one way that you can support our show, and we'd really appreciate it. What's going on, Mothman?
What's going on, Foxman? I'm excited to have another amazing edition of BoobTube Buddies. We're going to have a lot of sweet content out this month, right? We got the Get Down, we got BoJack, we got this, all kinds of great stuff for our audience to listen to, right?
Yeah, absolutely we do. And I actually have something I want to share with you later, a little upcoming idea that I've got, but I don't necessarily want to flesh it out while we're on air.
Probably not the place for a brainstorming session. So, yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
Exactly.
Real quick, just some sponsor stuff. We go over this every episode. We're going to truncate it so that we can get to the meat and potatoes of the episode, and we're going to actually have a little more fleshed out ads at the end, for those that are wanting to try to support us. But audibletrial.com/boobtubebuddies is the best way financially to support us. It's just a way to try out a free trial of Audible, which is fantastic. And it also gives us a cut of it as well. It's very similar to Netflix, where you basically pay a fee every month, and you're able to pick from over 180,000 titles. A recommendation of mine, and although I've not heard it, I've read the source material, is there is a Lock and Key audio play that is on Audible right now. Lock and Key is a comic book that is written by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son. It's a phenomenal dark horror comic book, so if you're watching Outcast, you maybe like horror comics, it's definitely something to try out. But they did a Audible adaptation of the first volume with a complete cast of characters, so you actually have multiple voice actors, and it's gotten really great reviews, so I just got it the other day to listen to. But without further ado, let's kick this bitch off.
Very cool. So the episode opens on an eye that's opening, and then Kyle riding his bike in his front yard, kind of as a, what would you say, like 12 or 13-year-old?
Yeah, thereabouts. Definitely a tween. And I would say, it's very picturesque, it's very heartwarming, it's slow-mo. I'm kind of surprised they didn't have some sort of 60s pop song on. I don't know. This would fit thematically, but musically it would. Wouldn't it be nice from the Beach Boys?
Yeah, it was bordering on cheesy. It was so pleasant.
It was, but I don't know. They kind of used that to great effect as they intersperse, flashbacks and such.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the dichotomy of what's happening here is, or the juxtaposition, I guess would be a better word, of having this beautiful, pleasant scenery. She's kind of chasing him around with the hose. There's slow shots of sparklers and her watering the plant, which that was the shot to me that was a little cheesy. It looked like a Crest ad, for her beautiful white teeth, and she's sitting there with her bonnet on, watering the flowers. But then, so she's spraying him, she's smiling, he's having a good old time, and then all of a sudden she goes into full on catatonic mode.
Yeah, and she just hits the ground, hits the grass, and then she starts rubbing in mud, and I'm pretty sure she eats some mud.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she was rubbing it all over her open mouth. So even if she wasn't chewing it, it was definitely in her mouth. Yeah.
It was like little gross baby food. But I don't know, just talking about the juxtaposition, I don't know if it's this scene, but there is a scene, and I think they do it a few times, where this doesn't have a lot of sound. It's kind of muted, slow-mo. If there's music, it's more I don't know, just low end. And then they cut to some flashbacks throughout the episode, and every time they do it, it's not only full on volume, but it's usually just terrible horror sound. So it basically goes from la di da da and then back, and it makes you jump. I mean, eventually you kind of get the deal throughout the episode, and you become immune to it, but it's fairly effective in the first quarter to half.
Yeah, actually, honestly, for anybody that's not watching the show, if you have surround sound, which I do, you should look to change the settings before you watch it, because I did that after the second watch of this episode, and it's what I'm going to do moving forward, because the jumps in volume are beyond startling. They are absolutely terrifying. I was leaping off my couch because they're just blasting sounds behind me.
Yeah, I like the 5.1. I think it's well done, and I like a good scare, so no complaints here. But if you're a wimp, you can put it in stereo.
God, such a dick. Already, here we go. Gloves are off, and here we are, right at each other's throats.
Yeah. That's the nature of Boob Tube Buddies. Or as one of our new listeners, someone at work that started listening, Titty Bros.
Titty Bros. That was pretty funny.
Which I thought was pretty funny.
That is really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the scene ends. She just kind of turns around, stares at him creepily, and then basically it flashes forward to the present, and Kyle's water is turned on at his house, and that's pretty much it for that scene.
And the water's almost as muddy as the mud she was eating.
Yeah,
and then
I think
up,
intentionally so, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then it cuts over to the Reverend, and he is giving a sermon out in front of his flock, and he mentions how thin the crowd looks.
Yeah, and he makes, a nice little joke about some people maybe preferring to fish instead of go to church, and everyone laughs, to which, he's like, why are you all laughing? This is the only self-defense you have against the darkness. And
that's such a dick move, by the way, to make a joke, have people laugh, and then ask them why they're laughing sternly.
It's called a guilt trip, and it's, I believe, what most religions rely upon.
Okay.
Right?
All right, I'm not biting on that, Mathis.
Okay, fine.
Always trying to get me in trouble.
Anyway, he goes on to tell the church a little bit about his fight with the devil, how it took on a child's face, in which case it cuts and shows the beaten and bruised face of Joshua Austin, who he kind of showcases. And I don't know if you noticed this, but there seems to be an ominous evil man in the back in all black.
I did notice him, and I actually didn't notice on the first watch through, but I noticed him on the second because you actually see him later in the episode.
Yeah, he's a bit of a motif throughout. They're obviously using this episode to introduce an unknown force.
Did you recognize who was portraying the character?
Data from Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right?
Bethany pointed that out to me, which is my wife, by the way.
I noticed him from the back, and I thought he looked vaguely familiar, but when you see him a little bit later full on, that's when I was like, oh, it's Data. Interesting.
Yeah, his eyes are a very unique hue, so it was pretty easy to spot him then. But yeah, no, in the back I did not recognize him. Actually, I didn't even see him there the first time. It's easy to kind of pass over him. But yeah, so Reverend's given this whole thing about the only thing that fortifies us and sustains us against the darkness is church. And then, he just goes on about evil catching him by surprise and how it was, inside Joshua and he got it out. And Reverend's like, I won't let my guard down again and won't let evil creep in. And
does the Reverend have an accent at all?
He's got a little bit of like a fiery Southern Baptist sort of drawl to his voice.
Oh, okay.
Probably not nearly as heavy-handed as I'm doing it, but that's basically my A style when it comes to doing accents.
Yeah, I think you're just stealing some of your impersonations from the Preacher podcast and bringing them over.
I'm literally doing the Preacher. That was the voice that I was doing right there.
Anyway, but throughout. And we've cut everything up to make it a little more sense of it, but this episode is all over the place in terms of cuts. But throughout this sermon, we see Kyle's going through boxes, and I think he finds a book. He's looking around, and at some point, and I think I kind of missed how this is happening, but did he drop something under the oven?
Yes, he does. He drops something under the oven. He goes to reach for it, and as he goes in, he notices something else is down there. He grabs it out, and it's a tooth, which cues a flashback. And he is remembering his mom locking him in the pantry. Or actually, no, it's the other way around this time.
Yes.
He's locking his mom in the pantry, and I guess he finally lets her out, and she lunges at him. There's this monstrous, demonic roar, and that's how that scene ends. And then immediately following, because that's playing in conjunction with the sermon that the Reverend is giving. So after the service ends, Kyle walks up to the church as the last stragglers are letting out, and one lady is staring at him, and you recognize her, I'm assuming, right? She's in a ton of different things. The one that is popping out at me is she's the lead character's mother in Big Love, but she's in, just tons and tons of stuff.
I kind of recognized her, but couldn't put my finger on what. I don't watch Big Love, but I think it's just one of those character actors that gets a lot of smaller parts. So
yeah, so in Seinfeld, she plays George's fiance Susan, her mother. So that's what I mainly recognize her from, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, but these are the ladies. You're talking about the ladies that come and talk to the Reverend right after the sermon, correct?
Yes, and you actually see her again at that little meal that they're having in the back of the church.
But yeah, one of the ladies is obviously very high-strung, and she's and very goody two-shoes, because she's complaining about the Reverend saying ass and talking about getting asses in the pews. That, I guess, offended her somewhat.
Her delicate sensibilities.
Yeah, her very delicate southern sensibilities. And then Kyle comes up, and they kind of disperse, and Kyle's interested if he brought up the whole ordeal with Joshua, to which he says, how could I not? It looks like he went through a meat grinder, but he basically left Kyle out of that equation.
Yeah, I mean, and then, they're kind of talking about it a little bit, and Reverend's saying that, people will tell you this, and he holds up the Bible as full of stories, but what good is it if people don't believe? And then, he's kind of saying that's the reason why I'm telling people about this stuff with Josh. Like, I want them to be vigilant. I want them to understand what is going on, and, how pervasive this evil is. The evil that took your mother, who was a kind, strong woman, and turned her into a monster. And he's like, but you freed her of that.
Yeah, and he isn't 100% on that idea, because he's never seen the black vortex or whatever, the venom that's spewed from Joshua. So this is the beginning of essentially the plot of this episode, which is he is doubting that he really freed his mom, or did he maybe do a half-assed job, and the reason she's catatonic, the reason he can't maybe save her, or didn't fully save her, is because he wasn't using the fullest extent of his abilities. He
has seen that black stuff come out of his mother, though. I guess I probably don't want to spoil it or move ahead, but it actually happens in this episode.
Yes, but he doesn't remember it.
I was pretty sure that he was conscious. I mean, as he's being choked out by it at the end, he is awake.
I don't know. He comes to. I think that part's scrubbed from his memory.
Okay, maybe scrubbed from his memory. I could accept that logic, but he was definitely awake as he's being choked out, because he's looking at his mom, she's looking at him.
Oh, yeah.
She's totally helpless.
Yeah, but then he wakes up the next day, the ambulances are there, and, I'm sure he's also repressed these memories, so I feel like this is something that maybe he's starting to... I think the implication is by the end of the episode, maybe he's piecing it together and starting to remember and realize that, this is just... there isn't a hope for my mom to not be catatonic, but we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay, yeah. You're right, we are.
Bit, yeah.
Okay, so the next scene is the Reverend's painting over the devil graffiti that's out back, and the sheriff with the sweet voice walks up, and sheriff starts talking about maybe all this stuff with the demonic possession. Maybe it's kind of like the story of the chicken and the egg. The more you rile people up, the more things like this will happen, because people are looking for it to happen and will blame any everyday problem on something like this.
Yeah, it's just, kind of typical run-of-the-mill parlor talk, and they crack open some Rolling Rocks. Trademark.
Yeah, basically, that's exactly what they do. But then Sheriff's like, I got your back no matter what, but bringing Kyle Barnes into it, man, we raised Cain in our day, but something about him's just not right.
That's spot on. I do continue to love that impersonation. I have no qualms with it. Well,
thank you. I'm worried that it sounds a little bit racist, but I think that it's pretty good.
Yeah, if deep voices are racist, then it's very racist.
Okay, yeah, they clearly are. So
okay, fair enough. Then you're a racist. Moving on.
All right, nice.
So I think from here they kind of have their talk, and now there's some boots walking on camera. That's all you see, and you see a sack and blood dripping down, and you're like, oh God, what are they about to introduce? Is someone else possessed and committing horrific acts?
Walking down Main Street, with a bloody bag. Like, this is way more out in because that would not have aligned with what they've shown us so far about the proclivity for darkness.
Yeah, but no, it's not. It's someone coming into the police station. They throw this sack on the desk, and you realize pretty quickly that it's some kind of animal remains, and it's a guy named Lowell. He's complaining that he's called about this before, and no one did anything, so he thought he'd bring the problem to them. And
I just like the deputy's line there, though, which is played by Roy from The Office. Mm-hmm. Lowell, smacks the thing down, blood is all over the place, and he's like, what the fuck, Lowell?
Yeah, he doesn't think he's, I don't know, he obviously doesn't think he's a murderer or anything. Maybe it's a common occurrence, I don't know, but Lowell goes on to let him know that there's, 6 of these where that came from. We're not really sure what it is, other than it's obviously not a human part, because the response from the police would be a little underwhelming if so.
And
right?
I don't know if they said something or if I was just assuming that was the case, but I was assuming it was a dead animal in there. Yeah, because it would be taken more seriously if it were a human being. So I mean, that's what it's got to be.
Yeah, if it was like a giant hunk of ass meat, it would be a lot more serious.
I don't know why you went immediately to the glutes, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Because I'm trying to think of any other body part that wouldn't just be a head. But what I did have in my notes is that it was an animal head, because that was my assumption. But I was proved wrong.
Okay, true. I think it's really odd that you chose the butt. Like, why would somebody cut somebody's butt off? Like, would be like the weirdest part. Like, even like a breast would make more sense, but like a butt, like that would be just so bizarre.
You saw the size of the bag. That would be the world's biggest breast. And what other part of the body are you going to cut off? I mean, if you try to do the stomach, then there's guts and everything else. I mean, I think it was a pretty educated guess.
I guess because I can't come up with any counter argument to that maybe there's something to that. It just doesn't sit right with me that somebody would come in with a hunk of butt meat.
I like severed butts, and I cannot lie.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so where were we? Now they're going off to the woods to, I guess...
Yeah, we're going to follow this plot line a little bit more, which is Deputy and the Sheriff. They pull up to Lowell's property, and the deputy's making fun of this horrible little homemade map that Lowell gave them, and Sheriff's giving him a hard time about, not knowing how to track out in the woods and things like that. And so they start talking about Kyle and Josh, and the deputy still cannot believe that the sheriff didn't do anything. I mean, because from where he's sitting, they pulled up. He's got blood on his knuckles. He's there. He has this history of doing stuff like this. And there's a kid that's battered and bruised at the house. Like, are you really that in the Reverend's pocket where if the Reverend says don't arrest him, you don't arrest somebody who's clearly just been beating the shit out of a child?
Yeah, and, I don't know. I'm not well versed in the law, but if charges aren't pressed, I know that kind of sets a precedent where you can't do anything, but I think the caveat to that is to someone that's not an adult, right? Because the harm was apparently to a kid, and even though the parents don't want to press charges, I think still, like, you could have, protective services intervene. So you totally get where Roy from the office is coming from, but at the same time, Sheriff thinks there's a little more going on, and it's not that he's in the Reverend's pocket, it's that he believes there are forces that you just can't quite police.
Yeah, and Sheriff's like, well, what do you have against him anyway? Like, isn't he your brother-in-law? And he goes on to say, like, it was no ordinary domestic disturbance. I don't know why I'm James Earl Jones all of a sudden.
Yeah, you fucked that one up.
But Roy doesn't believe any of it, and Sheriff's like, our badges can't protect people from certain things. And so, finally, the sheriff ends up seeing blood on a tree with a nail in it, and then the deputy turns around and sees what they're really there to see.
Yeah, so the nail and the blood is obviously from the one Lowell pulled down, but then the rest of the trees, in some kind of path almost, are a bunch of gutted raccoon carcasses. So poor little raccoons, little night burglars, nailed to the tree, their innards and stuff carved out and missing. So you're like, it's kind of fucked up. I wonder if this is demon related.
Did it seem to you like there were more than 6?
It did. It seemed like there were 28.
Did you actually count, or are you just...
No, just ballparking it.
Okay, yeah. There was a lot of them, and they were actually leading back through the woods, so I don't know if these are quote-unquote fresh ones, like they've just been put up there, but they're clearly, they're basically, marking a trail.
I assume that Lowell saw the 6 on his property, and maybe more have either cropped up or it went, beyond his line, or I don't know, maybe he has shitty vision and he can't see that far.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Or maybe Lowell wasn't interested in following the trail of dead raccoon carcasses back into the woods. So.
Yeah, maybe he had enough common sense to avoid that.
Yeah, I'd say so. But anyway, so the sheriff and the deputy, they do follow it back because it's their jobs. And
Goddamn right.
they get to this camper in the woods, and they knock. No one's inside, so they go in, and it's got scratch marks all over the inside, which they chalk up to being animals. Us, as the viewers, were a little bit more savvy to some of the stuff that's going on, and we assumed that somebody was in there. I mean, what do you think? Possessed, probably, and just like scratching at the insides. Like there was literally blood around it too, so like obviously scratched like their nails off.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really know 100% what to think. There's a lot of weirdness going on, so whether it was someone possessed in there or it was the commotion and that's where they did the deed of killing all the raccoons, you don't know, but you definitely assume it has something to do with these possessions and the darkness that is kind of overtop this town.
Yeah, and it's not explained any further than that. At this moment, it's just kind of something for you to speculate on. But it also kind of seems like something might have been watching them from the woods based on the camera angles were a little ominous. They were kind of pulled back and kind of switching in and out of focus, like as if it were like the vantage point of somebody watching them.
Yeah, I don't know. Stylistic quirk or pending antagonist. We'll soon find out.
Hey, well put, man. Kyle walks to the nursing home, or he's walking through the nursing home halls, rather, and he goes into his mother's room. She's still full-on catatonic, and he's just chatting with her, or talking at her, rather, and telling her about, how he saved this boy, and he's saying, I don't know if I put you here or if I saved you too. And, after what you did to me, I didn't think I'd ever lose a minute of sleep. And then he starts having another flashback of her dragging him through the house. And it's kind of also peppered in with these little, again, to me, semi-cheesy flashbacks of her watering the flowers again in the garden. And then he looks up at the ceiling, and this I really want to talk to you about. So he looks up at the ceiling and sees that stain on the ceiling above her bed.
Real quick, I just have to point out my note, because earlier when I was talking about how it just kind of jarringly scares you at certain points, right?
Yeah.
So I have a note that says, and it's basically his quote, like, after what you did to me, I told myself I would never scare of being pulled by the hair. And, like, it basically is like that. He's having a conversation and just really briefly cuts. And then it just goes right back to them talking.
It's in the mid sentence sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. The thing I like about it is it doesn't seem like a cheap scare because it does almost put you in the fragile psychological state that Kyle obviously is in. Because you've seen him turn on a dime and get very violent. When Megan was at the door banging on it, and he just got up in a rage, and you weren't sure if he was going to actually hit her because we're just being introduced to him. You get the idea that this post-traumatic stress is very much like this. It's just like jabs in his brain occasionally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
Okay, so he looks up at the ceiling and he sees a stain on the ceiling above her bed. Now, to me, the first thing I wondered, is it possible that stain, which is directly over her bed and it's black, could have been from maybe the thing that she vomited, or do you think it was just legitimately water damage?
So, to me, it's a few things. So it's just normal. This triggers him being kind of upset about her living condition. So the fact that there's a leak, and maybe it's not a live leak, but they haven't changed out the, whatever you call it, in the roof that would have mold, which isn't the best thing to breathe, and her covers need changing. It's that, but I think it's also meant to foreshadow the fact, and my viewpoint, that he doesn't recall that ever happening to his mom, the satisfaction of that leaving, and the fact that last episode Reverend says, do you believe in this stuff now? And he doesn't have any kind of dialogue alluding to well, I've seen that before. It's more like that's almost a learning moment for him. So I think this is continuing to stress him out, the fact that closure wasn't given to his mom, that the evil's really and truly out of her.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So you do not think, though, necessarily that beyond maybe just being a catalyst for future events, you don't think that stain actually has anything to do with the black substance that's come out of her? Because I guess when Josh does it, it doesn't leave a stain afterwards. It removes itself from the ceiling, which looked totally normal, I guess, afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think it's just kind of a visual language that's meant to continue to like spurn on his curiosity and the reason he doesn't want to let go of this. I think it's meant to evoke the fact that like we think about the black stuff that was spewed out, but not to make us think that she's just been in the hospital randomly spewing it at the ceiling.
Okay, because I don't, for whatever reason, when I look at the black stuff, all I think every single time is Hexus from Fern Gully. Have you seen that?
I have absolutely seen Fern Gully. I remember the black oil monster that was an analogy for, like, deforestation and all the evil that goes with it.
Yes.
I don't remember the specifics, but I remember that black monster.
It leaves a trail where it goes. Like, wherever it goes, it leaves one destruction. And so, when I see that stuff hit the ceiling, for whatever reason in my mind, it's like, well, yeah, of course it's going to leave a stain, but I actually don't think that it does.
By the way, did you watch the credits on the second episode, or did you just skip through them?
I at least listened for a minute while the Reverend's knocking on the door and yelling Kyle.
The reason I bring it up is I'm sure it was in the first episode, but it wasn't until the second episode credits that I noticed that all the different locations they go to, there's the blackness kind of creeping around onto the metal and the objects.
Oh, you're saying in the beginning?
Yeah, the actual credit sequence, there's the black venom from the first episode. I'm sure it's on the first episode's credits, but I didn't notice it until I knew what it was.
Oh, yeah. No, I have watched it all the way through, and I've continued to do so every time. So, yeah, it's like the black stuff's like creeping around the house, kind of like coming in and out of cracks of doors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
crevices. Yeah, anyway.
Okay, well, yeah, we went on a little bit of a tangent here. So Kyle is like really agitated by this stain, goes up to the desk where the nurse is supposed to be. Nobody's there. That's pissing him off even more. She comes walking up, and he's like telling her about the watermarks on the ceiling, the bed sheets are coming untucked or whatever. And I mean, he's letting it fly. He's like he's cursing at her, and the lady is politely telling him that visiting hours are over, but they'll take care of it. And so he goes to leave, pauses outside, kind of looks back a little bit, and then it's a quick cut of him pulling away, and then now there's like a wheelchair there. So that he, excuse me, that he is basically pulled her out of there.
Yeah, so he wasn't going to wait for the living conditions to get slightly better.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the neighbor, Roddy Piper, now sees the lights come on next door, and Kyle is carrying someone into the house. The neighbor goes in, knocks, tries to see if everything's okay. He's still trying to be very supportive. He has that guilt about the violence going on that him and his wife passed away, right?
Yeah, she passed away almost a year ago.
Yeah,
from this day.
Yeah, so his late wife, that they felt guilty about. So he's trying to just offer support and be there for him. And Kyle's kind of being a douche about it. It's like, thanks for letting me borrow your car, but it doesn't give you the right to come sniffing around here. Good night.
Yeah, and I mean, while he is being a douche, it's still, I mean, if he doesn't want to chat with the guy who's coming over to his house at night, like that's reasonable, I feel like.
Oh, I absolutely think it's reasonable, but a way to say it might be like, look, I appreciate your concern, but I'm tired. I need to get some sleep. Maybe we can talk another time.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't seem to have like
tact.
A lot of social grace.
Yeah. He's pretty blunt and abrasive. So anyway, but that's the character we're getting to know, right?
I did actually look up this guy's name, and I know for a fact that I have not heard his name said because I feel like this name would have stuck with me. It's Norville.
It sounds just like Rowdy, which is what I had written down.
I mean, Norville, what a strange name.
Yeah, maybe they'd said it and we just kept hearing normal.
Maybe. That name certainly would have resonated with me.
Because if you asked me to name, hey, come up with the first 100 names you can think of that start with an N, I would still never get to Norville. Ever.
I mean, in 1,000 names, I don't think I'd ever come up with it.
Nigel, sure. Norbert, maybe because of the Eddie Murphy movie, but never Norville.
Definitely not.
Anyway.
Okay, so next scene is Megan pulling up to Kyle's house. It's the next day. He's got a present kind of hidden from her behind his back. She has groceries for him, so he grabs those. And she notices that he's dressed in actual human being clothes instead of just, riding around in his pajamas all day. So
let's say he's dressed in his Sunday's best.
Yeah, if his Sunday's best is a t-shirt and jeans, then sure.
For Kyle, goddamn right it is.
Yeah, it's basically a tuxedo for him. So she goes to leave, and he stops her and asks her to bring this present with her. He wants to make amends, so now we know it's probably for his daughter's birthday. And she's like, no contact covers this, Kyle. We can't do this. And Holly in the back of the car asks if he's going to the party with them. Obviously, he's not. And Megan does take the present and says, just take it slow.
Yeah, so she takes the present, doesn't make it seem like she's going to deliver it, so you don't know, but she also, I think, wants to appease Kyle. Anyway, so you realize they're just on their way to that party, and so that's done
before
there.
we cut to the next scene, as he's walking back in, there's this weird shot of a bike that looks like it's being swallowed by a tree.
And it's kind of ominous, right?
Yeah, what do you think happened there?
No clue. I will say, it's kind of crazy when trees grow around objects. Whenever I walk the dog, there's a cool oak tree in one of the yards, and it clearly grew over a mailbox. So there's like part of a mailbox coming out of it. What that has to do with the plot, anything that's going on, I don't know. I'm sure it'll make sense eventually, but it's not outside the realm of possibilities.
Interesting. Will you take a picture of that thing next time you walk past it and send it to me?
I actually have a picture on my phone, so I'll find it, because it's, the first time I saw it, I was like, how is this possible? And, had to look it up.
Nice. I think we should take a couple of minutes on air to go ahead and knock that out right now.
What?
Okay, so Kyle goes inside and he starts cutting up fruits and mixing it with applesauce and basically making it into a paste for his mom to eat. And he's walking back to the room, and as he is wont to do, he pauses and stares back at the pantry again. And now he remembers his mom tearing up the kitchen trying to get to him as he's scrambling away from her, hiding under the table. She finally grabs him by the hair, which seems to be her favorite grip, and then starts beating him. And he actually fights back, and he ends up biting her, and she recoils a little bit, and he manages to throw her into the pantry real quick, and then jams a spatula into the lock so she can't actually get out.
Yeah, and he's talked about in conversation with the Reverend where it was multiple times that she had attacked him, and he finally, fought back. So you're starting to see this unfold where he just couldn't take it anymore and snapped. Because, we see them be so subdued in the past where she's like sniffing his neck, and he's just, terrifyingly eating breakfast and obviously not running or attacking. But it's clear that through this relationship where she's been possessed that things escalated and, continued to get worse and worse. Oh, yeah. And I think that now we're understanding from what we were told in the first episode and from what we're witnessing in this one on screen, that this is like that final throwdown fight that he was describing. Yes. Sunday. Kyle versus possessed mom.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
So now we cut to the child's birthday party with Holly walking up and Megan leaving Kyle's present in the car. Probably a good decision, right?
I would guess so. I mean, you don't know what it is, right?
No, you don't know what it is, but you know that he's not supposed to be doing things like this. And for her to kind of just like sneak it in there seems like it would be a little irresponsible. But anyway, so Megan ends up seeing Kyle's ex, whose name is Allison, and goes to walk away, but Allison kind of like runs up and gives her a hug. She's obviously very happy to see her.
And by the way, it's kind of weird, right, that between Stranger Things and this show, there's two little kids named Holly.
Holly
Jolly. It's one of the episodes.
And Holly is the name of Walt's baby in Breaking Bad as well.
Man.
Yeah, I'm very close to saying baby Holly every time I say Holly, but this Holly is actually probably a few years too old to be a baby Holly.
Yeah. Anyway, so Allison is Kyle's ex, right? So
yes.
Allison and Megan are talking, and Megan almost seems like she wasn't sure if she was invited, right? And then she says that, and then Allison's like, no, of course you were. Why wouldn't you be? but obviously just because of the turmoil and the things that have transpired, maybe she doesn't feel like she should be there, but she wants to make an effort. So, I thought that was interesting, kind of seeing that part of the relationship and kind of the fallout and just the complications of, extended family when traumatic events like this happen,
And it's fleshed out further because they are having a drink together as the party continues, and they're still talking. And Allison says that Amber, her daughter, she's getting used to it, but it was tough for a while. This is, she is referencing Kyle's absence. And, Allison says that the daughter, Amber, thinks that it's her fault, not Kyle's. And Megan, walks away as Allison's attention is pulled elsewhere and sees Amber outside learning to ride her bike. And you can just, I'm pretty sure what they're trying to show you is that she just feels really bad that these moments are happening that Kyle's missing. Because, Amber's outside. This is her first time riding the bike. You can tell because there's people crowded around, kind of helping her out and then cheering for her. And you can just see in her face, that she's really sad. These moments are happening that he'll never be able to get back. Even if their relationship is ever mended, he's just will have missed all these unforgettable moments.
Sure, and we now, from the end of the last episode, we know that Kyle wasn't possessed. It was Allison.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, we know that Kyle didn't do anything wrong. He probably was protecting them.
He just took the blame and had them kind of continue on as a family. So I thought it was interesting to have Amber remember this and think that it's all the mom's fault because it was the mom that was possessed, yet they're kind of secretly living this lie. Obviously, Kyle must think that's the better life for his child, but Megan and all the other parties, and obviously Roy and everyone else in the city is none the wiser, and he's just the child abuser.
Very true. And so after the party, it's just Amber and Megan and Holly and Allison. And so Megan does end up giving Amber the present. There's no card, so Allison, I guess, doesn't realize whose it is.
Yeah, so Allison doesn't know. I mean, I think she says, "Oh, we'll find the card later. Just go ahead and open it," right?
Yeah, and you do get a quick little cut at some point later on in the episode where it shows her holding it was a book inside. And so she's just kind of holding on to this book. I can't remember exactly what it was. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was Homer Price, or is that the name of the author?
I'm honestly not sure, but it is, I believe, the book that Kyle finds in the beginning of the episode before he drops something and goes to find his tooth. So he finds this book that I'm sure has some significance to him or to her and wants to, hand it down the line.
Okay. All right, well, let's pull away from this plot line for a little bit and go back to the Reverend, who is eating lunch with all the cackling hens from the church, and one of the ladies is definitely flirting with him. And he's trying to kind of weasel out of any plans, but old church lady Flo's not having any of that. She says, oh, yeah, he's got some availability anytime this week for dinner.
She's pimping him out.
Basically, yeah. I think that she realizes, maybe it's not healthy for a man his age to just be obsessed with chasing demons all the time. Maybe it's important for him to have something to ground him and grant his life a little bit of normalcy. Yeah,
and I wonder, we don't know most of these characters yet, so I wonder if Flo has actually seen any of these possessions or really, believes it. You almost wonder if it's does she not believe it and is God, I wish he would get a woman to lighten up and not think everything so much like heaven and versus hell, or if it's more of a Alfred and Batman scenario where Alfred obviously knows there's villains and knows he's Batman, but is constantly trying to get Batman to do something other than just put his life on the line every single night and not have a life, not have a lineage, and all these other things.
Yeah, and, speaking of which, he's talking about fighting the demons, and the one lady who's flirting with him is scared of the demons, obviously. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we fight it by filling these pews, and you ladies, you're my recruiters. And the older lady, who I talked about as being Susan from Seinfeld's mother, she's like, is Kyle Barnes part of this righteous army? Did he put those bruises on Josh? And Reverend admits that he was there and basically says, like, Kyle fought the only enemy in that room that day, and that wasn't Josh, basically, alluding to the fact that he had been possessed.
Yeah, so he finally kind of gives in. Obviously didn't approach it in front of the entire congregation, but when pressed, he continues to try to defend Kyle, and I think more than anything to almost defend him from what the city already thinks about him from, the instance with his kids, and maybe almost implying that this isn't his first rodeo with demons,
Well, yeah, he's obviously got a very bad rap around town at this point.
Yeah. And so now Reverend is showing up to the one lady that's kind of into him, correct?
Yeah, the saucy lady.
Yeah, and he thanks her for helping with the recruiting. She made him some blackberry pie, and it's also obvious that there's some poontang pie if he wants it. Am I right?
God damn it!
I'm just saying. She's hot for preacher, right?
Yeah, she gives him blackberry pie, but she's obviously hinting to the warm apple pie.
Mm-hmm.
But he even calls her a temptress, and the whole conversation's got a very overt undertone of flirtiness to it. But then Reverend gets a call, and he apologizes to her, but says he's got to go. She's obliging, she's nice about it, but she's very clearly disappointed.
Yeah, that he had to take a call and go on official business, right?
Yes. So in this next scene, we find out what the call is. He was clearly called by the nursing home, the director of facilities, he ends up saying, basically saying that Kyle's mother is gone. So
yeah, and we find that out soon enough because now Kyle is trying to feed his mom that mash.
Not going so well, huh?
Yeah, mash that she made earlier, being that she's catatonic, it doesn't work really well. She's choking a little bit on it, and he continues to have flashbacks, right? So his mom has, does this typical demon trick. They all do this shit in the movies. She basically turns from being just like crazy evil to normal voice mom. So she's pleading in her normal voice to let him out. Please, please,
begging
please.
And crying and apologizing.
Yeah. And so now you're like, how did she ever get out of that? How did she ever get out of that to knock him on his ass and somehow bust his tooth out and have it, fall underneath the sink or whatever? And it's because she used this old trick. If he had only watched all these other horror movies that we have watched, he wouldn't have fallen for it.
Definitely. So he slowly walks over, slowly takes the spatula out, and basically the moment that he does, she comes bursting out, roaring like a goddamn possessed lion, and it's terrifying. But you've actually seen that cut earlier on. And so then the Reverend ends up showing up at Kyle's, and Reverend, tells that line that we just said about how the nursing home called him, and Kyle says, like, that place is awful, man, I don't want her there.
Yeah, so Reverend's like, I'm, on the emergency call list. What are you doing? And that is initially his only real reason. It's just that the facilities aren't there. But through the conversation, it's obvious that he thinks there's more to be done, right? And this kind of goes back to the fact that I don't think he remembers the full events that happened that day, being the fact that
you must be right, because he actually
out.
says, I want to cleanse her like I did with Joshua. And I don't think that he'd say that if he remembered the actual purge coming from her mouth.
And I will say, this whole episode, because that was the impression I got, you're on kind of wondering, is that going to happen, right? Is he going to have this empowering, motivating moment, like a really turning point in his life where he actually completes the exorcism of his mom. His mom becomes non-catatonic and is actually responding. And then, it doesn't really make up for the other parts of his past, like with his family, but then he's just this new individual where things are working out. And you're like, all right, maybe this is that scene. The Reverend starts to prepare an exorcism for his mom.
Yeah, spoiler alert, that's not at all what happens.
Yeah, hopefully you've watched the episode before listening to us talk about it.
Yeah. So he flashes back to his mom bursting out of the pantry, attacking Kyle. He fights back. He's cut. The blood gets on her. And then the curtain is knocked down. She just recoils from it. And, he tackles her. Cut back to the present. Reverend splashing holy water on her to absolutely no effect. Kyle pulls her bed over in front of the light. Nothing happens. And Kyle's like, I remembered one other thing that happened that day. And he starts punching the wall until that cut on his hand reopens, and then he throws the Reverend off him, who's trying to hold him back at this point, and just squeezes the wound so that the blood splurts from it into her mouth,
and she starts choking.
Yeah, it's
just
not
so
like the black stuff coming out. She can't swallow it.
And that was kind of like your last thread of hope as the audience, because the holy water didn't work, the actual dialogue didn't work, the light didn't work, and this is that last straw. And there is a comment, I don't remember when it was in this episode, but Reverend and Kyle are talking, and he says, the possessions and the exorcisms are infinitely unique, just like you and I are. So sometimes you exorcise a demon and you get Joshua, who's going to be functional and fine, and other times that exorcism takes a piece of them with him. And that's kind of how Reverend was explaining earlier in the episode why his mom is the way she is, not basically trying to not have something like this happen.
Yeah, and so they realize that it's not worth. So Reverend bandages up Kyle and gives him a little bit of advice. He's like, I understand why you brought her here, but you can't keep her here. And Kyle starts crying. He knows that the Reverend's right, and his mom gets taken back to the nursing home.
Yeah, and then Roy gets really pissed that somehow he's not getting in trouble for this, in which case the sheriff comes in and is like, the hospital didn't press charges, so he's good. He can kidnap all he wants.
Are you being funny?
I am being funny.
Okay, I was like, damn, I didn't write that down.
No, there's no ramifications for him just stealing someone from a hospital.
No, I mean, but maybe he has, some sort of, rights, I guess, to pull her out of there if he wants to.
Probably not as, someone with that domestic record. And it's also weird that the Reverend is the emergency contact. So maybe the Reverend has right of attorney or whatever the fuck and just didn't press charges. But man, he keeps avoiding all these legal pitfalls that us modern folk have to deal with.
Thanks to the Reverend.
Yeah, Reverend runs this fucking town.
At this point, he flashes back to his childhood again, and it's post-fight. He wakes up and sees his mom laying there on the ground. There are flashing lights outside. Someone's knocking. It's the Reverend. He walks in, and they end up carting her off as presumably a CPS lady, which is Child Protective Services, walks up and stops him from following her. Mm-hmm. And now we're going back to Kyle going to his house. His mom is now not there. And there's a piece of wrapping paper or something, and it says... Yeah, he opens up the door, and then the wrapping paper falls down. Yeah, and it says, Amber loved her present, love M, for Megan. And, he just has this look of joy in his face that we've yet to see from him as a character. So it's a heartwarming moment that she found a way to squeeze that present in there without, violating the, restraining order or what have you. It's a very sweet moment, and and that's when it cuts to Amber sleeping and holding that Homer Price book that we mentioned earlier. Yeah, I don't recall the author Homer of the Iliad, the Odyssey, writing a book called Price, so I assume that's just the full author name. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. Anyway, so now we're back at the nursing home, and the ominous man in the hat, who I mentioned it earlier, but when Kyle is... I did mention it earlier, I notated it. When Kyle is being kind of douchey to Norwegian, is that his name? Try it again. Norwal? No. You're really close. It's not Narwhal, but keep going. Norval Rickenbacker? There it is. Okay. Yep. Norval Rickenbacker, when they're having that conversation, you actually see the man in the black fedora in a car looking on. Really? Yeah, so you see him 3 times in the episode, and this is the 3rd time when he is now actually walks into his mom's room and sits down and says, hello, Sarah, and says so much fire in you, and has this whole spiel. So you're like, oh shit, this guy's involved and knows what's going on. Oh yeah, tragic to see you like this. You had so much fire in you. Too bad Kyle will never know how hard you fought back, but despite it all, we have him anyway. And then, I mean, seriously, she's in this state and you're going to come in and just, rub her face in everything that's going on? You haven't taken enough from her if you're really associated with these demonic happenings. And So he goes to walk out, and there's a tear streaming down her face.
Pleading for a character that's obviously associated with demons and the devil to be a little more merciful.
Yeah, I mean, just have a little bit of humanity, you fucking dick.
Yeah, Jesus, man.
So anyway, this is where we get our final scene, which is a flashback to Hexus leaving his mom. So like the black vomit tar stuff coming out of his mom, pooling above her, and then a huge thick tendril of it reaches out and grabs poor preteen Kyle, and he is being hung by it, basically suspended in the air around his neck. The mom's watching helplessly, can't move.
It puts him in a sleeper hold.
Yeah, basically. I mean,
right?
he's choking out. Like he's starting to pass out, and then the thing drops him and dissipates, and that's when the credits roll, and you can hear the Reverend knocking and yelling, "Kyle, Kyle."
Yeah. So a few things here. One is simply the fact that after the let's keep calling it Hexus. After the Hexus dissipates out of Joshua, you remember how it kind of went towards the screen, and the screen being Kyle last episode?
Yes.
The only reason it seemed to dissipate is it hit the light. And now you're seeing it have unfettered access to Joshua, and yet it doesn't kill him. I think it intentionally chokes him out, maybe hoping to have him black out and forget some things.
Kyle, you mean?
Kyle, yeah, sorry, Kyle. So you're wondering, Kyle has these powers, but is he important? He's been called the Outcast, but if he was just this person who is dangerous to the demonic side and could, thwart all their plans, why wouldn't it just have definitely finished the job and snapped his neck and killed him here? Or is it more like a Hellboy type character where it's meant to really usher in the darkness and all the destruction, but god damn it has a heart of gold and we're just trying to crush it?
Yeah, it's funny, you think Hellboy, and my immediate thought was the Devil's Advocate, where Keanu Reeves, like, they need his character because he is the son of the devil, and they need him to have sex with his half-sister, who is the daughter of the devil.
How many times have you seen Devil's Advocate?
Probably like 30 times.
Really?
Because it comes on TV all the time.
I was about to say, because you made a Devil's Advocate reference.
Yeah, with
Stranger
the painting
Things
behind his desk, because it's kind of pushing out like.
And I
exactly
vaguely
like
remembered
the wall.
The visual, but then for you to be able to recall it in such clarity, particularly a Keanu Reeves movie, is weird.
Okay, here's the thing with Keanu Reeves, and I don't want to get into a whole long tangent here, but while I think that Keanu Reeves is a horrific actor, while being a very, very good human being by all accounts, like a really good human being, I think that he is a terrible actor who chooses really interesting roles in movies, and so I somehow look forward to seeing Keanu Reeves movies because they're generally decent, in my opinion, despite having maybe Hollywood's most wooden leading man.
Yeah, I mean, he has actually had his fair share of good movies. John Wick was pretty fun.
I love John Wick. Like, that movie is really good.
What did disappoint me, though, I think it was called Knock Knock, but Eli Roth, who's a horror director I love, he did Cabin Fever and the Hostel movies, and he's an actor in some Quentin Tarantino movies, but he's kind of doing movies again. He had one called Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves, and 2/3 of it are super fun and interesting, and then it just gets silly. But it's not actually Keanu's fault. But going on a tangent, the way I would best describe this episode, and I think I've told you this already, I wish I got the reaction on air, is that it's a scary version of Weekend at Bernie's. Yeah,
that was so funny. I was dying laughing, but it's because the joke actually hit me for two reasons. Because, first off, he's carting his mom around like she's basically Bernie.
Yeah,
But then the other thing was that, to me, this episode felt a little different than the first episode. The first episode was very dark, but this one was peppered in with a couple of cheesier moments in dialogue with surrounding characters. Anything that didn't have to do with demonic possession. So I was actually laughing at it from that perspective too, because there was a little bit of campiness to it that would be inherent with like an 80s movie like A Weekend at Bernie's. So that's what, I mean, I laughed for like maybe 10 minutes after you sent me that.
But yeah, this episode overall, really liked it. I mean, they're introducing more character to the show. Not characters, but just kind of more character with it. I mean, you get more funny moments. You get, kind of the oddness of Lowell just as a character. Not that I expect him to continue to be in that whole plot line. You now have this fedora-wearing man who's ominous and adding some complexity there.
Yeah, the story's opening up.
The story's opening up. I will say, I guess it's really all how you execute, right? But I remember complaining in Preacher about the cowboy storyline and the Tulip and Preacher prior to the show storyline, because they took such a long time giving us these flashbacks that it took for a while to get a complete picture. In some cases that was annoying. This one I almost feel like they should have done that. Like, it was an entire episode that essentially was completing the initial possession interaction he has, and kind of as a plot point, he has this doubt about if he really saved his mom and takes her in. I don't know that it should have been a whole episode. I feel like this flashback could have played out throughout the first, second, and third episode, and him, stealing his mom and trying that could have been just part of a broader episode. I don't know how you feel about that, but that was my only real complaint.
Well,
I feel like it could have been stretched out and more important, pivotal things could have happened.
Perhaps that's the case. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what comes with the upcoming episodes and whether or not that could have actually been fit into them. But for me, this episode, while still very enjoyable, I'm still enjoying the show. It was markedly clunkier than the first one and cheesier, really, because the first one was really dark and gritty, and then this one, the scene that is just burned into my mind is her watering those flowers. The lighting on it is so bright around the edges, kind of like this ethereal fading on the outsides of your television, and her in that bonnet.
The soft lighting like a soap opera has.
Yes, it looks so much like all I could think is I feel like I'm watching a Colgate commercial right now.
Yeah, and truthfully, that didn't really bother me. I mean, I feel like what they were more than anything trying to do, and I admire them trying to do it, but it's very hard to make an audience feel this way. But I think they're just trying to capture the different shifts in Kyle's mind, right? So if you think about childhood memories and nostalgia and the golden days,
lovely warm memories that you literally see probably in brighter and sweeter tones and hues than it actually was.
Yeah, and so they do a very, very striking juxtaposition, not just with subject matter, but they pull the colors out. When you have the possession scene, it's the same kitchen that's in the other scene, and it's not like the house just got dirty. They just literally pull the saturation out of the film and make it look darker and grittier, and it's just supposed to represent his states of mind. But yeah, a child's reminiscence of the good old days is kind of cheesy. I can
it's
see
kind
it
of
taking
like
you
that
out.
line from The Watchmen where the one lady says, as I get older, even the darkest parts, looking back, just get brighter and brighter.
Mm-hmm. You don't. How come they're not the good old days until after? Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know it, Mothman. But anyway, you ready to put a bow on this bitch?
Let's put a bow on this bitch.
All right, so first off, to all the listeners, thank you very much for tuning in, as always. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. Get in on the conversation. And again, as always, please rate us on iTunes. It really helps for the indexing and just makes it so that it's easier for new listeners to find us.
Absolutely. So we will see you next time, little buddies.
Hey buddies, this episode of BoobTube Buddies is brought to you by Audible.com, the only place to hear grown men trying to imitate the voices of children. This back-to-school time of year reminds me of when I was in high school, sitting in literature class getting horny listening to Zeus get it on with that swan. It also brings me back to one of my favorite books, a harrowing coming-of-age tale full of uplifting moments of intrigue and romance. That's right, I'm talking about Richard Wright's Native Son. This book will speak wonders to you if you've ever been discriminated against due to the color of your skin, made mistakes as a product of your environment, or masturbated in a movie theater. Head on over to audibletrial.com/boobtubebuddies and get yourself a copy of Native Son or any other free audiobook of your choice. Also, don't choose Native Son. You have a choice. What are you doing? You have free will. Pick a better book.